All right. So, like I said, this chapter's a little bit long, but it is what it is. So here we are, lesson four, growing cities. We're looking at the first part that says Americans moved to cities. Well, as technology grew, as factories improved, safety wise and wage wise, you had more and more people start to move to cities. Not everybody wanted to farm. Remember, for the most part, America up to this point was largely agrarian, okay, largely farmers. So they started moving to city. So we say the changing city. One of the things is they had to build on more and more buildings, more and more houses. In many cases, they couldn't build them fast enough. So this is where you had what were called tenements apartments that were set up. Many times you share an apartment with somebody else, or at least you might be in an apartment building on your floor. There's four apartments, and you all shared a restroom. Okay, now these were not ideal conditions. Um, a lot of disease went through these areas. Very harsh living based on uh, just you're that crowded, that many people. Things like tuberculosis and things like that. Other types of very communicable diseases spread pretty quickly. Um, not proper sanitation, these types of things. But they were affordable. People could buy them. They could get to work as well. You also had cities now, because you're growing so fast, you start building not out, but which way? Up. So this is where you have the start of building of like skyscrapers. Okay. So skyscrapers you would see, like downtown Dallas, downtown Fort Worth. We're mostly talking about like Boston, New York area at this time, okay, Rhode Island and things like that. So, anyways, the cities start to change. They also change the way you start having people from all over, coming in. A lot of immigrants because there's more jobs in the city. And so our nation changes over pretty rapidly from a quote rural society to a urban society, which means living in the cities. The new Americans that we're talking about. And if you want to know where we're at on this one, we are on page. I gotta put my glasses back on real quick. Sorry, I meant to give you a page number right at the beginning. Um, but if you look at 295, there's a pretty good picture slash drawing of what the city looks like with its buildings. Oh, mass transit like trains and buses and trolleys as well. Okay. So, anyways, wanted to make sure that you understood that and saw that picture of that a little bit. The new Americans that came in. So during this time, when they're talking about as new immigrants, they weren't from our traditional Western European countries like England. Uh, you know, you had more and more people come in that were from Southern Europe, not Western Europe. You had a lot of Germans at this time, a lot of Irish at this time. So that brings new religion as well. Catholics, you had a lot of Jewish immigrants. These people are not always accepted into a society. And many of them, when they moved over here, lived in their own little group, okay, because they lived with people who spoke their language, knew their customs, knew their cultures. They wanted to live by people that were the same in many ways. And so that's why you had these German communities set up, these Italian communities set up, Irish communities. They were familiar with the language, familiar with the culture. So you did have a big push where people started to come in to the U.S. in the 1860s, 70s, early 1900s. So actually, this is where the Hamrys and the Swensons actually came in to the United States in the 1850s, so earlier. But they were Swedish and Norwegian. They lived in Swedish and Norwegian towns. Okay. Now they came into a place called Ellis Island. Ellis Island is an island in New York, and that's where these new immigrants would come in. The boats would pull up. These people would get off the boat, and they'd process them in after they checked out who they were or where they're going. So you actually had a large spike in immigration during this time. But we needed it because the U.S. was growing. The U.S. is growing at this time, really expanding fast. Living in the city, like I said, was hard. It was dirty. You didn't have a lot of space. Jobs were plentiful, so you didn't always have a lot to say about your wage. Like I said, the different languages going on, just like I said, sanitation. A lot of times during this time, people you just dumped your trash on the street. Those types of things. Certain parts of the areas, were controlled by Irish. Certain were by Polish or by then another group called the natives. Those types of area, and I don't mean Native American, but they call themselves the natives. They were quote original Americans. So those are your new immigrants, or I'm sorry, hard life in crisis. Settlement houses came up, so kind of like a tenement, but gave people cheap housing, affordable, safe housing. Now there was a bunch of other people within these settlement houses, along with you, but it gave people an opportunity once they got here, a place to stay, a place to live. All right, so those came about as well. And let's go to section 5. We won't spend too much time. The rise of progressivism, but I want you to know what that is. Progressivism is basically progress. And when you progress on something, you are making it better. So during this time of inventions, during this time of growing cities, during this time of people having more opportunities to make more money, you had what was called progressive politics, progressive economics. How do we improve? All right. So one thing was the power of the press, and so this is on page. That is well. Sorry, I'm still trying to get somewhat used to this. So page 298 is what we're talking about progress, and you can see there it's highlighted and also reforms, right? So power of the press during this time, the press really started to have an influence on American society. More and more people were literate, could read. Um, more and more ideas were being able to be brought about with the paper, and on things like how do we progress. So many times, even the papers at that time didn't necessarily have to be 100% truthful. They could make up stories, highlight stories, sensationalize stories. Never heard of that, right? Some people say that the press still does that today, which some of them do to a certain point. But the press started to have more and more of a voice in America. Okay, the right to vote. Who was this taking out? Who took over this movement? Anybody have a guess? Women during the time. You started to have women wanting more and more of a say. They were more involved in politics. They were more involved in the economy, working in factories. Okay, so they felt they should have a right to vote. Many of them, held their families together, worked for their families. So why can't we vote? So you had a big push for that, and eventually that was passed in 1919. Okay, the right to vote, and it was written as an amendment. Okay, um, Susan B. Anthony, uh, what's that? Lucretia Mott, and the other lady's name is I think it's Caldwell, if I remember right off the top of my head. They were instrumental in having this more equal rights for women, and a big thing was voting rights, which is very key to being an American. Is you have the right to vote. One of your jobs, American, is to vote. We want you to vote. Okay. Other progressive reforms, once again, progressive, making society, making life better, was prohibition. And so or the 18th Amendment was the Prohibition Act, and that actually outlawed the production, sale, or use of any sort of alcohol. Many people had a big push for this, that alcohol caused a lot of problems in society. Oh, man, yawning in the garage. Um, so they had this big push to do away with alcohol. It would cause too many problems. Now, prohibition only lasted for a short time, and that was the 18th Amendment, and then the 21st Amendment did away with prohibition. Okay, but alcohol use, production, and selling it was actually illegal for a little bit during our history. Other progressive reforms is the growth of education. Now, we don't mean that people weren't being educated, but this was the opportunity for public education. Many people at that time were either homeschooled, hey, like we're doing right now, or they were schooled at a private, or not necessarily even private, but religion school. If you wanted to go past the eighth grade, there wasn't a lot of opportunities in many places to go up to an education after eighth grade. So you had a big push by a guy named Horace Mann, who really started to push the idea of, hey, education is for everybody. Okay, everybody should be able to get a free public education. Free, right? Okay. But anyways, you guys understand what I'm saying. Public libraries became available. Um, people were realizing it is key if you're going to have a democracy that voters be informed, that people be literate. So your first library started to really come open. Like I said, one reason behind that is Andrew Carnegie. If you've ever seen his name on a library, donated money for that. He understood how important it was to be educated. Okay, to be educated. Well, to be educated, you have to be able to read. Now, this is where then you have these starting to set up, especially on the East Coast, these libraries. Higher education. What do we mean by that? We're talking about colleges. Okay, more and more colleges became available. It wasn't just Harvard and Brown and Princeton and Rutgers anymore. You started to have a bigger push for, um, college degrees. Okay, and so that, or not even, college degrees and even like master's degrees, some doctorates, but mostly the more opportunity for college degrees